They wanted an animatronic bull. Its head moves, it snorts smoke, it's got lit eyes. We have 5 to 7 minutes to get all of these elements on the field and 90 seconds to get everything off the field. It's a huge balancing act between being in stadium and watching at home through that camera lens. It becomes really important to create a streamlined control system on the back end.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Smarter Spaces podcast. I'm your host, Michael Trezza. On today's episode, we're diving into the energy of live sporting events. What if you could take a step beyond the curtain and see the intricate web of technology that makes this all possible? From jaw-dropping player entrances to high-stakes decisions made in draft rooms. Every moment's powered by a symphony of AV and engineering precision. What does it really take to create these unforgettable experiences, and what innovations are just around the corner? In this episode, we're about to pull back the curtain with a very special guest. Get ready to discover the secrets that transform a simple game into a spectacle you'll never forget. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Smarter Spaces podcast. We're diving into the world of sports today, where technology is everywhere, whether that's on the field, in the stands, or behind the scenes. From AV and special effects that electrify player introductions to the massive displays and lighting that define the stadium experience. Joining me today is Ian Bottiglieri, VP of Operations at Image Engineering. Ian's team is behind some of the most innovative designs and integrations in the industry. They power everything from game day presentations to the connected rooms that you may never see on TV. Ian, thanks for joining. How you doing today?
Great. Thanks so much for having me.
Of course. I'm excited for our chat today. I think this is really cool what you and your company do. So let's dive right in. Can you give us some background on the company itself, including its founding and some early clients?
Sure. So Image Engineering was founded in 1996 by three brothers. And so our company is actually one of those stories that literally started in one of our owners' basements. Over the past, 25-year plus history of the company, we have really focused on sports and live entertainment. And some of our first big NFL clients were the Buffalo Bills and the Baltimore Ravens.
Excellent. So you just mentioned some of those teams, and I've done a little bit of background myself on your company because I find it super interesting, some of the projects you guys have done, which we'll get into. But that goes beyond the NFL, correct?
It does. So we currently work with 18 of the 32 NFL teams. We've worked with Major League Baseball on the special effects and game day presentation for All-Star Week since 2019. We've worked with a number of MLS Major League Soccer teams. We work with about 8 of them right now, and we've been working with the league itself on the cup matches and the All-Star games since 2018. And then we have a handful of arena sports clients, so NBA and NHL clients throughout the country that we work with.
Awesome. So you just mentioned a lot of different sports, right? A wide net of sports. But you did lead with the NFL. So let's dive into a little bit of that. So you guys have done some work on some NFL draft rooms as well, correct?
We have. So we have done NFL draft room design and installation for the Baltimore Ravens and the New York Giants.
Excellent. So we'll dive more into that later on, but let's talk about, some of the technologies that your company does. And I know it's much more than AV. So can you give us some details and maybe some examples on some of the projects, right? So from player introduction packages, including pyrotechnics, LED video, lighting effect, and all that good stuff. So I think there's a really cool example here for all the NFL fans listening, the classic Ray Lewis dance introduction. That kind of came about on one of your guys' first projects that you guys were doing with the Ravens, correct?
Yeah, that was one of our first large, foray into special effects for game presentation and player introductions. And so the Baltimore Ravens came to us and they had a primetime game. They wanted to make it special. And it was actually ESPN who was debuting cable cam for the first time. Right. And so essentially what we did was we did a player introduction, created a gauntlet of CO2 jets, and ESPN brought the cable cam down, and Ray Lewis came out of the tunnel, did the squirrel dance with all of the CO2 going off around him. And because that was the first real debut of that, there was a lot of pomp and circumstance around that. ESPN played that for probably about the next week. Anytime, SportsCenter was on, in promos, all different things like that. And that really started, the chain reaction that became, throughout the league. Hey, we need to do something as our players come out onto the field. We need to make some kind of show prior to the game starting to get folks in the stadium earlier, to build some like brand storytelling and different things like that. And so we've come a long way since then. That was a relatively simple setup, but it's kind of what started everything for us.
Yeah. To me, that Ray Lewis, player intro is kind of defines that, right? I think that really set the bar for all. You still have guys in the NFL today copying Ray Lewis's intro, as a tribute to him, which is really cool. So it's really cool to be on that side of things. Another really cool project I saw that kind of invokes a lot of technologies together. And that was with the Vikings, Skull Vikings, right? The 34-foot custom Viking ship with a fire-breathing dragon. There was some fog, snow machines, LED lighting. It seems like the works here. Can you dive into a little bit of detail on that project?
Yeah. So the Minnesota Vikings came to us, and they have a 15-minute pre-show that they do before the game starts, and they're very committed to storytelling and their brand and marketing and everything like that. And so they wanted to do something that hadn't been done throughout the whole league, and they based this whole show on Norse mythology, and so it all anchors around the dragon boat, which, as you said, it snorts CO2 out of its nose. At one point it was breathing fire. Now, it has additional CO2 effects that come out of it. It has snow, integrated lighting. And then we have rune stones. They're actually, behind me here is the intro itself. Where we take more of those effects out onto the field. And the biggest thing for us is a lot of these effects, they don't all speak the same native protocol. So you have lighting effects that are utilizing DMX. You have CO2 effects, which are just using relays. You have some of the CO2 and the smoke that might also be using DMX or a whole host of protocols. And so it becomes really important for us to be able to create a streamlined control system on the back end, because we have anywhere from like 5 to 7 minutes to get all of these elements on the field. We typically run somewhere from like a 30 to 45 second show while the players are running out. And then we have about 90 seconds to get everything off the field. So having a really streamlined user interface and control system for our technicians to recreate that show week after week is really the magic behind a lot of these different effects.
Right. That's fascinating. Just, all the components that go into it. And I think you hit on something key is the different protocols and languages per se for the different technologies that everything is speaking, to be able to bring that all in unison to, control and operate and choreograph, which we'll get into in a little bit. I think that's super fascinating. So, benefits of being the host of this podcast, I get to bring up some of my favorite teams you guys have done some moments for. I want to talk about two different projects you guys did in 2019. First was a player introduction for the New York Jets. It's been, a sad time for my team recently, but hopefully we're on the up and up here. But it looks like they engaged Image Engineering to help redesign some of their player introductions for that season. They wanted to provide that fresh new look. Can you talk about the, maybe the flexibility in design and functionality and some of that revised branding that the fans had never seen before that you guys worked on?
Yeah, so for that player intro, the Jets came to us. They wanted to amp up their game day experience, and they wanted to integrate a couple new elements. And so in their player introduction, it was composed of set pieces, CO2 towers that were reminiscent of like a jet plume of smoke,
Right.
and then the actual doorway that the players run out from, which is electronically actuated LED entrance. And so in this instance, we have some lighting effects, we have smoke effects, we have the LED video doorway, that all opens up at the touch of a button. And so, for that one, it was really, what makes the Jets unique? And then what are some things that we can do that other teams around the league aren't doing so that we could help them kind of stand out? And really, we took some cues from the WWE and how they were doing some of their intros and things like that. Because anytime you watch one of those shows, everything is all about that entrance and energy. And so, by integrating LED video surface, we were able to do headshots for each of the players with stats on it. We could roll the intro video now down on the field in concert with what they were doing on the Jumbotron and everything like that. So it became a very connected introduction. And then ever since then, they've just included more and more and more. And so they've gotten, last year they had a ton of night games, and we integrated lasers into that. We integrated stadium lighting package that we could do since they got new LED lights. We're able to go lights out for their intros and things like that. So yeah, the Jets keep just kind of pushing the envelope and adding new elements to their intro every year.
Definitely, yeah, and we've gotten a big draw on a lot of nighttime, primetime games. So that a lot of that's on display there, which is really cool. So you hit on it a little bit. Bespoke lighting and effects. I know you guys have done a good amount of stadium tunnels where lighting was really the star of the show. Some examples include the Packers, Texans, that Chargers hallway, Rutgers football. So what goes into that in terms of the lighting and maybe those lighting tunnels per se?
Yeah, so that whole experience is twofold when we go in and we start designing and we think about it. So the first is we need to design it for camera, because a majority of the audience who's going to see that is going to be looking through a camera lens. They're either going to be in the stadium and looking at it on the big screens, or they're going to be at home watching it on TV through a broadcast feed. So that's one thing that we take into account. And then the second thing is the players themselves. And so what can we install there that, gives a nod to team history, to the team brand, the story, and how do we create a compelling show so that we amp those players up as they go from the locker room out to the field? And so one of the first that we actually did was in 2016 for the Philadelphia Eagles. And that played a lot on lighting, sound system. There was a lot of graphics and imagery of like team success over the years. And we look and go from team to team and really look like, okay, what's their personality? And so the install that we do for the Green Bay Packers was much different. It was, kind of paying homage to Lambeau Field and the hallowed ground that is. And while, less flashy, it looked like it completely fit with the stadium and the mystique of the team and all of that. And then you look at something like the LA Chargers and their intro, you look at where they are on the West Coast, and a lot of cutting edge technologies that are developed out there and all of that. And so theirs is a much cleaner, more modern brand aesthetic. So that's where we integrate some lasers and LED lighting and all of those kinds of effects to really encapsulate what makes up that team.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. You hit on two things, which I wanted to reiterate. And the first one being the different stakeholders involved, right? So you have that live element of it where you want it to look great for the team, right? They're investing all this time and money and you guys to do that awesome project. But at the end of the day, also, like you mentioned, the majority of people are going to be watching it through a lens, through a screen. So there's different elements to kind of, meet in the middle there to really make both parties satisfied. At the end of the day. So that's really fascinating. And the second part was it doesn't seem like these are remotely cookie cutter at all, right? Everything's catering to that flavor and taste and that vision for the client at the end of the day, which is really cool.
Absolutely. And you also have to look at, what is the physical infrastructure? So, what are the dimensions of those hallways or those walks?
Right.
What's the ceiling height? Is it a long, narrow space? Is it a wide space? And a lot of those pieces will inform, what's the kind of technology that we're going to use or the exact fixtures or any of those items. Because like you said, it's not cookie cutter. So we need to get it to match and also fit from a functional standpoint.
Right. Very similar, in the world of AV, obviously, as well. I've done some of these conversations where we talk about spaces where you don't know what's going to be in the walls when you start going in there and the physical limitations in the space itself. So that's very true. So another big component in the AV world, right, in technology is digital signage and a lot of displays. Right nowadays, there's displays everywhere. Can you talk about some projects that have those displays involved in some digital signage? Any projects stand out here?
Yeah. So, I mean, there are a few. And so one, with the Green Bay Packers, we did a build for them a few years ago where we had, again, they were looking to capture the history of Lambeau Field. They had never done a true player introduction down on the field with set pieces and all of that. Right. And so we wanted to capture that history, but also have some modern touches to it. And so those set pieces were primarily built with LED video panels embedded in structure that looked like we took chunks of Lambeau Field and brought it down to the actual playing surface. And, that was all paying specific attention to color matching the bricks or right. the inscribed G's, the same color that the steel of the building is painted is, exact color match there. And then integrating, the special effects of low fog and then LED video. And so a lot of the considerations there were making sure we had the proper back end set up so that the control room could properly feed video down to those boards, especially because they are a temporary, they roll out really quickly and then we do the intro and they roll right out, making sure that we had a robust back end there with our fiber distribution system down to there and all of that was a really important part of that build. And then we have something that's, completely different on the other end of the spectrum, where at Lucas Oil Stadium, they brought us in and they wanted to revitalize some stadium signage that they have up in the rafters, for Lucas Oil Stadium that just kind of got lost there. And, on come game time, it was in the shadows. You couldn't really see it. Right. And so the way that we approached that was with, LED pixel lighting. And so those were about 25 foot tall by 54 foot long signs. And again, we wanted to encapsulate the brand. And so we created, these LED faux neon to harken back to old school neon Lucas Oil signs. And the LED the LED pixel tape is controllable within 3-inch sections. So we're actually able to run low res video. So, and imagery through it. So when it's the anthem, from the fans' perspective being so far away, it looks like we're putting the American flag through that. Salute to service. They have a lot of ability to change the colors and, low res imagery that's running through it. But now anytime they have like a camera shot, you just see the stadium signage glowing there in those rafters where before it was just kind of completely lost. So.
Wow. That sounds like it enables you guys to get, pretty creative with what you can do, which is really cool.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, looking at any way that we can tie in with the overall stadium, whether it's their digital signage systems or, anything that we can do to make their workflow easier, to take commands out of their video switchers and things like that. That's what we looked to do, because we can create a more seamless, complex and comprehensive show for them that way.
Right. Is that another component to it as well, in terms of planning, utilization in technologies, hardware that's already there, at the stadium? Because I know you just mentioned, for some player introductions, rolling equipment in and out, right? Just for that one segment. But is there a big component of tying into permanently installed equipment in these stadiums as well, I presume?
Absolutely. Because what we're trying to do is, whether we're doing it down on the field, if we're at a DJ platform, or like the Lucas Oil sign up in the rafters, or even like at the Minnesota Vikings, we have 60 snow machines that are, spread out between concourse, catwalk, everything like that. The more we can integrate with the control systems that are already there at the stadiums and their video boards, all of that, our goal is to be an exclamation point onto things that they're already doing. And really the best way to do that is if we can integrate seamlessly with them. So there's a lot of back end that we pay attention to and that we engineer into the systems to make sure we're riding on the same network, that we could take commands from them. It makes the workflow easier on our side, and it produces a better, end result for the client and their team.
Definitely. That's really fascinating. So some single work event. I know you guys have done some big ones, from the 2019 Home Run Derby, which was won by my Pete Alonso and the Mets, just to add there real quick, to Super Bowl 50 at Levi Stadium, the college football championship in 2020, just to name a few. Super Bowl 50, Levi Stadium, Broncos versus Panthers. This one was a big one due to 70,000 fans in the stadium that you had to, accommodate the technology and everything for as well. But like you mentioned, that other aspect of it, the people at home, 111 million viewers. Can you dive into the details about what went on for that Super Bowl?
Sure. So, for the Super Bowl 50 in particular, we provided all of the in-game pyrotechnics. So anytime a team scored, we had pyrotechnics for that. And then the post-game, trophy ceremony and celebration, we provided all the pyrotechnics for that. And so, again, like you said, it's a huge balancing act between what's the show that we're putting on for the folks who are in stadium, and then what are folks going to see who are watching at home through that camera lens. And when you look at our work for the College Football National Championship, we've been a part of 10 of those. MLB All-Star Game, we've been doing those since 2019. A lot of those, you got to figure, yes, you've got somewhere between, 30 and 70,000 people in person, but then you have millions who are watching on television. And so the way that we're actually designing the pyrotechnics, the size of the pyrotechnics, we are really taking into account what is that camera lens going to capture. And so when we look at like MLB All-Star, a big part of that is making sure when the guys are walking up for Home Run Derby, that we have properly sized effects so that there's always something going on behind them in the camera lens. And right. It's, not like you're shooting up a 300-foot piece of pyro product. Well, the camera is not going to catch most of that effect. So we'll actually do smaller things, smaller pyro effects and things like that. So it looks really compelling on TV. And then we'll have some different effects like flames and stuff like that read well on TV, right. But then the fans in the stadium get a different kind of experience. They can kind of feel the heat. They feel the, right. The sound and that from those effects.
Yeah, I know from a viewer perspective, I've seen plenty of events where I'm like, wow, this looks crazy on TV. And then you think, I can't even imagine what it would be like to be there in person. So I think that's kind of what you just mentioned there. So that's definitely a huge component of it. Are there any other stadium arena technologies that you guys utilize? I was going to see if you brought this up, and I think you alluded to it. Because after doing a little bit of digging, I thought this was such a cool example, and that's the Minnesota Vikings snow effects. Essentially, this is a field-wide snow globe, right? And I believe this came about due to some limitations with some fire and flame effects on the actual field being banned. Can you talk a bit about this project?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was a project that was, it came about, I guess, in 2019 or so, right around there. And we had the Viking ship and the Runestones out on the field for a couple of years. And the Vikings game presentation team wanted to take their storytelling to the next level, and they wanted to create more of an immersive experience for the fans to not only be watching a show, but for the show to kind of reach out and touch them. And so, as you said, they wanted to create this stadium-wide snow globe. And to do that, we installed 60 snow machines throughout the building, catwalk level, concourse level, fully distributed, so that we could do a whole immersive installation for that team and the fans there. And a really important part of this was designing the overall control network, just because there are so many units, they're so spread out, and making sure that it was part of this, this very well choreographed show. We needed to make sure that we had full control in the control room to trigger with other effects and other things that were happening throughout the stadium on the boards as part of this whole show. So that's been there for a number of years now, and it never gets old to see a 70,000 seat stadium just kind of fill with snow at the push of a button. It's an amazing thing to be a part of.
Yeah, it's really cool. Another special effect I've seen a lot of your projects include are laser technologies from the San Diego Padres. I think you mentioned at the top of this podcast, the Milwaukee Brewers, Los Angeles Lakers, and one of those single special events in the NJ Devils Stanley Cup reveal. Can you discuss kind of what goes into the laser technology, the laser projection technology?
Sure. So there are a couple different types of laser technology and laser shows that we'll do. So some of them, like you were talking about, these stadium shows for the Padres and the Milwaukee Brewers, those are really focused on graphics. And so we'll do an 8 to 10 minute graphics and atmospheric show where, it might be a 4th of July show. It could be a Star Wars night or something like that, where we're telling a story utilizing lasers and then typically tying in pyrotechnics as well. And so we'll tie together all of those systems because the pyro speaks its own protocol. The lasers have their own protocol. And so we'll tie everything together on a timeline based off of time code. So that is, that's the main focus there for those kinds of shows. When we look at the LA Chargers, the LA Lakers install, and then some of those projects, those are truly atmospheric lasers. So no graphics. We have lasers that we're shooting across the whole, whether it's arena, stadium. They've become really popular for these NFL night games,
right.
From the tunnels, just because we're able to cover so much of the stadium with these lasers. And so a lot of that we're looking at, what is the space that we have to terminate the lasers on? Because there's a lot of regulations around using lasers in an entertainment capacity. So, what are the locations that we can safely terminate on, say for guest players, everything like that. Soundtrack becomes super important because lasers are so choreographable, and there's so much that you can do with them. So there's a lot of pre-programming and pre-planning that tie into that as well. And then what are the rest of the elements that are happening at that same time? Because you don't want to blow out the lasers so that you can't see them, and you don't want to use the lasers to step on other effects. So, back for the Lakers a number of years ago, we did their install, and it was all atmospheric lasers kind of around the arena, on the court. We actually had them on automated winches so that we were able to bring them down for a really great viewing angle for the pregame show, and then get them up and back into the rafters before gameplay started so that we weren't impacting any sight lines or anything like that. So some of those kind of utility and infrastructure concerns also will come up in those capacities. Because at the end of the day, people are there to see a game. Like I said, we're an exclamation point on it. So we don't want to take away from the actual reason they're there.
Yeah. You just touched upon it a little bit. We just talked about the choreography, right? What's involved in the programming, controlling these effects? You kind of just alluded to it in things like not wanting to overshadow other effects and, making it prevalent, but also not making it too prevalent and taking away from other things as well. So I'm sure is there an extensive process ahead of time in the pre-planning stage as well?
There is. And so we have a whole creative services department here at our company that work on full turnkey design. So a lot of these things start out as 3D renders when we first have conversations with our clients, understanding, what are they looking to do? What are they looking to accomplish? What kind of emotion are we looking to instill? What makes up this show? And so we'll typically go through a storyboarding process. Mm-hmm. We'll create, 3D renders, so that we can, for the client side, show them what we're pitching, but then for our own team, make sure, hey, we understand this as well, and we're getting it right. We're all on the same page.
For sure.
And then from there, we do a lot of pre-visualization. And so it's a lot of design, whether it's a practical special effect like a flame or a pyrotechnic, or, lighting or laser effects. We will do full pre-visualizations. We'll marry those to the soundtracks so that we can have a full synced timeline. So if it's effects that are happening to an intro video or effects that are happening to the run out song for the players, just so that we create the most, comprehensive, well put together show possible. So usually that whole process takes weeks, if not months.
Right. I bet.
Yeah, we're not doing it live. When we roll it out.
Go for it, right? Yeah. Press the button, hope for the best.
Yeah.
Another component that you kind of just made me think about is the broadcast element. Does any aspect of what you do, like you just described a whole extensive thing, right? Not only from the pre-planning, but also on game day itself. But in terms of pre-planning and everything else, do you guys consult with the broadcasters and broadcast team at all on game day, or obviously prior? What's involved with that, from a broadcast production standpoint?
Absolutely. That's huge. And that's huge, especially for the national level events. So the MLB All-Stars, the home run derbies, the CFPs, all of those, because, they're going to have a lot more cameras and coverage than they've had before.
For sure.
Like on a normal game. So that gives us a lot of flexibility to have these effects caught on camera. And so we will typically we'll consult with them in a couple different variations. So when we're talking about like the hallway walks and things like that, of instituting lighting and lasers and effects back in the tunnel hallway, we meet with them very early on to find out, where their camera is going to be. Are they going to have handhelds back there? Is it just PTZs? What does that look like, so that we can position our lighting and effects in the correct place, make sure we have key light for them, all of those kinds of things. And then when we look at the effects that are going to be out on the field or on the roof of the stadium, we consult with them. We provide them all of our pre-visualizations so that they completely understand what our run of show is, where we have the effects, when the effects are going to be going off. That way, they can call the drone shot or the helicopter shot and get those like stadium, full stadium views for national anthem or the player run out or different pieces like that. So on that side, we consult with those guys, but then from a functional standpoint, a lot of these games have cable cams at them.
Yep.
And if we have pyro or fire down on the field, we will actually work in concert where we will have a cable cam operator, one of their staff next to us. Mm-hmm. And that way we are in direct communication, because the last thing we want to do is burn up one of their lines, or they have some kind of issue where they can't move the camera.
Right.
And so we need to know where they are. They need to know where we are in the show to make sure it's safe for both them and for us.
For sure. From my perspective, it seems that you guys are just providing a technical director's, like a guy in a control room, their dream of like, wow, you just added in all these bonus shots, all this other great footage to be able to, take the sky cam when there's flames flying everywhere. So you're just giving them a lot more in their arsenal to utilize, which is really cool.
We live and our main focus is to feature the players, the team, and the brand. And so the more anything and everything that we do is all to feature that player, to get them excited, to get the fan base excited. Definitely. So when we're able to give those, the broadcast directors and the technical teams more to work with, that's our goal. Because for us, it's not about the effect. It's about how the effect elevates the players.
For sure. And the player experience, the brand experience, as you mentioned. So that's super important. So we talked a lot about control, but what specific Crestron technologies do you really lean on to achieve these results in all of your projects?
Yeah, so I mean, a big focus for us in Crestron Control, a lot of it has been AV over IP. I mean, that has just led to a ton of flexibility in system architectures, layouts, redundancy, reliability, and so for us, it provides a lot of variation in how we can apply these technologies, the visual technologies, using the control side of Crestron provides a incredibly streamlined integration, both for our team and then for how our clients were able to integrate with them and make it easier on their side. And so, some of the biggest places that we'll see this are going to be inside of a tunnel walk where we have these different elements. So it might be video monitors or projection that's tied in with lighting and possibly some, atmospheric smoke effects and different things like that. And so Crestron allows us to put a lot of those pieces under one hood. And then we have a mode that we can run it in for game day when those players leave the locker room and head out to the field, triggering the lighting, the video, the audio, and kind of all of that at one time. And then a different mode for when they're doing stadium tours during the week and they have tour guides that are coming through and can kind of hit the go button on the touch panel and make those fans who are coming through to do the stadium experience feel like they are a player.
Yeah, that's really cool. So obviously we touched upon various sports you guys have covered. So how do different sports vary in their approach to things such as big screens, player intros, all the technologies and experiences that you guys provide? Is there clear-cut differences, say in the game day presentation of basketball versus football, or does that vary just per project and per vision of the customer, so to speak?
Yeah, so I think it definitely varies per per client, per team. But I think you see some broad similarities. So, football, they're looking to amp up the player. They're looking to amp up the crowds. It was huge for us during COVID because the NFL teams actually kept our services because they didn't have fans in the stands. They needed something to help provide their players with the feeling of home field advantage.
For sure.
So in NFL, you see a lot of it is done for the player and the fan base to continue to amp up the players and get them into it. In basketball, we see that is very much geared towards, more towards camera, especially because you're in, a smaller space. There's not as much that you could do from a pyrotechnic and fire standpoint. So a lot of that is for, the camera and then also the fans that are there experiencing it in person.
Right. And
then as we talked about, previously, a lot of those national level events like the college football playoffs, the MLS, all-star games and home run derbies and things like that, those are really geared towards broadcasts because, while they do have a good number of fans that are there experiencing it in person, they have millions of people who are seeing it at home through that camera lens. And, let's get them excited. Let's instill the feeling of like, oh my God, look how great that show is. Right. I want to be there. Yeah. I want to, get to that or be at an event like that. So, I think that those are a lot of the, some of the biggest differences that you see between all the different variations.
For sure. With that being said, are there some key trends that you've seen emerging in the game day presentations that are of note? Are certain things or technology scenes that customers are looking to create, or are you noticing a trend, or is it kind of just, again, per customer basis here?
Yeah, I think, a lot of what we're seeing is that fans are coming to these stadiums and they're expecting to see a pregame experience where, before it might have been like a nice to have or something that, some teams did and some teams didn't. But now the whole game is entertainment. It's more than just the game that's being played, but fans are coming to expect a pregame show to be a part of. And so you see what teams are doing, and based on who the team is and what their story is kind of dictates how they go about it. But a lot of these pre-game experiences are now becoming, more immersive. And so are there ways that fans can, based on the effects that we're utilizing, kind of like the Minnesota Vikings and the snow and all of that, how do we get them to be part of the show? And if you make them part of the show, you see the different, like the LED wristbands and things like that, where they become part of the lighting.
That's
show.
Really cool. Yeah.
And all of those things. Well, that gets folks into the stadium earlier. And so then you start to see an ROI on merchandise,
behind it,
concessions, on, all of those things. So now this thing that was a nice to have also starts to drive revenue. And then it becomes one of those things where you don't get this experience at home. Right. And so, then maybe you do want to come out to a game where you haven't before. So that's a lot of what we're seeing, our teams really investing in that, that pregame experience and the entertainment experience throughout the games, whether it's, halftime shows and, doing more of those that, they're not going to show up on TV. It's not a Super Bowl halftime show or that, but it's something that is part of holistic entertainment and things that you have to be there in person to be a part of an experience.
Right. I think you nailed it with ROI. That's obviously, a major component of it. And there seems to be more and more, mini concerts or these halftime seem to get longer and longer now just for a regular day game or just non-primetime game or special game or playoff or something like that. So that's interesting that you mentioned that. So we talked about the Giants draft room you guys did and some other draft rooms as well. I mentioned at the top of this, there's some of these, behind the scenes spaces, so to speak, that you might not necessarily see on TV. Are there other spaces such as offices or workout rooms within the same facilities that you guys provide these technologies for as well?
Oh, absolutely. So it's done campus wide. And so, the draft rooms are some of the most complex and flashy uses of the technology. But we utilize Crestron systems throughout entire facilities. So we'll see them in team meeting rooms, in the auditoriums for coaches' offices, weight rooms, and the reason why we're utilizing it throughout is that we can create such a streamlined experience for all of the users. So if it's a coach and, they're controlling, some projector and some inputs and things like that in their office, they have the same experience when they go to a team meeting room or when they go to the auditorium. And so now it becomes easier and more efficient, and they know exactly kind of like what they're doing. How do we, join a virtual meeting through, a control panel, or how do we call up different input sources and things like that, route the video. We are able to create the same experience for them, just at different levels of complexity all the way throughout the building. So it makes a really cohesive ecosystem. Same thing goes for, being able to now institute AV over IP and creating additional flexibility for the different stakeholders who might be utilizing the technology in the spaces. It's just a lot more familiarity. They can work faster. If they can work faster, they're working more efficiently. It's less time trying to get the team to, the room to work, and where they can just work with the players and the team. So we, utilize it all throughout those spaces, as well as like conference rooms and different things like that. Yeah.
I mean, we talk about it a lot here at Crestron. Consistent user experience at the end of the day is super important. And you just want the room to work. You don't want to, you can be going in for an intense, 6-hour meeting sometimes, and you don't want to spend 45 minutes of that getting the room to work. So we hope that's where Crestron comes into play in order to get the room up and running very quickly.
And that's a big part of what we use and how we design our systems, is that, coaches, scouts, player personnel, they just want to go in, they're doing a couple things. So they want a really straightforward, user experience. It doesn't have to be overly complicated or that. When we get into the data analysts who might be running the draft room, or the football video operations guys who are cutting together game tape and, and different things like that, they have a different level of experience, and they need to have a different level of control in these rooms. And we're able to create a much more custom experience for them. It's like going from driving an economy car to a sports car.
Right.
Those guys really want to be able to drive the system, get every kind of use out of it, and it do exactly what they do and need it to do. And that's the best part about this, is that we have the flexibility to be on either end of the spectrum.
Definitely. Really important. So you guys have quite the impressive portfolio. Let's wrap it up here with, you guys have done tons of cool projects. It seems like you've done a little bit of everything. Is there anything that you still perceive out there as a curveball? Like, what's the most unique and wild request you've gotten from a team?
Yeah. So I think the most unique request came to us a couple of years ago from the Houston Texans. And their mascot is the bull, and they wanted to create an animatronic bull that was on top of their player runout tunnel. And so it's a complete representation of their mascot.
Right.
Its head moves and goes in all sorts of different directions and things like that. And then it also has special effects that come out. It snorts smoke. It's got LED lit eyes. And then it's part of a larger tunnel that rolls out. And so, now we're getting into motion controls and those kinds of systems integrated with special effects. It was just, it was a little bit of a wild thing. And when you go and look and see how the project has turned out, it's definitely one of the most unique elements that's out there at any kind of NFL player introduction.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot would go into that for sure. But that I always think that's a pretty interesting question to ask, because I'm sure there's times where you gotta hone the client in a little bit per se with some of the requests.
Exactly. It's, again, we only have a couple, it's not permanent, right? It's, you're starting to get into like theme park level, animatronics and things like that. And they have the benefit of it living in the same place all the time.
Right.
We have to be able to push it out in a couple minutes, then push it back
dismantle it. Right.
So, it's the back end planning for those there's a lot that goes into it.
Definitely. I would imagine so. Well, Ian, thank you so much for taking the time, diving into all the projects you guys have covered. Super fascinating conversation. This is right up my alley with AV and sports intertwined. So again, thank you so much for joining.
Thanks for having me. It was great being here.
Awesome. And everyone, thanks for listening and watching the Smarter Spaces podcast here. That's a wrap on today's episode. Be sure to give us a follow on all social media platforms and be on the lookout for future Smarter Space podcast episodes. Take care, everyone.